Hey there, wake up. It's Means Morning News. Just after 11 a.m. on the East Coast, I'm the newsman Sam Sachs. And wow, we already made it to the Friday show. A reminder that as we get older, time is speeding up and our bonds to the mortal world are rapidly unwinding. Anywho, got any big plans this weekend? Well, U.S. bombs are falling on Russia, just days after President Biden gave permission to the Ukrainian army to carry out the strikes. Russian logistics and artillery positions were struck in the Belgorod region, reportedly using the High Mobility Artillery Rocket System, or HIMARS, a piece of military hardware provided by the United States. Under new rules communicated to the Ukrainians by the White House, U.S. weapons can only be used to target forces in Russian territory that are attacking or preparing to attack, and the Army is still prohibited from using longer-range missile and artillery systems to strike deeper into Russia. How long that restriction will hold remains to be seen, as President Biden has slowly ramped up U.S. involvement in the conflict in terms of the types of arms supplied and how they're used. That's despite his early warning that such escalation could trigger a larger war with a nuclear-powered superpower. We are in the midst of that spiral of escalation now, with Russian President Vladimir Putin promising, quote, asymmetrical steps in response. Putin also threatened to supply weapons to other countries to attack Western targets. Quote, if they consider it possible to deliver such weapons to the combat zone to launch strikes on our territory and create problems for us, why don't we have the right to supply weapons of the same type to some regions of the world where they can be used to launch airstrikes on sensitive facilities of the countries that do it to Russia? Then there's news that Russian warships and aircraft are headed to the Caribbean for military exercises in a few weeks. According to U.S. officials who've been tracking the movements of these ships. This should not be that big of a deal since NATO is also conducting military exercises in the Baltic region near Russia. But it gets dicey because U.S. lawmakers are never chill about this stuff. Since the drills are being done with the cooperation of the Cuban government, Senator Marco Rubio called for the U.S. to impose consequences on Havana. So for those who, like me, have always wondered what the Cuban Missile Crisis would have been like if Twitter existed, we might all soon find out. The Secretary General of the United Nations is sick of seeing ads for oil and gas companies. In a speech delivered to the Assembly this week, Antonio Guterres described the fossil fuel industry as the, quote, godfathers of climate chaos who rake in record profits and feast off trillions in taxpayer-funded subsidies. He said that, quote, billions of dollars have been thrown at distorting the truth, deceiving the public, and sowing doubt. And then Guterres called on governments around the world to ban advertising from fossil fuel companies, like was done with tobacco companies. He added that tech and media companies should also stop accepting fossil fuel-funded ads right now. France banned fossil fuel ads, but they're rampant here in the United States. A report from Stop Funding the Heat found that tech companies like Google and Facebook have made tens of millions of dollars off fossil fuel advertising, and as DeSmog blog reported, U.S. media companies are also raking in dirty advertising dollars, with the New York Times and Reuters leading the list. The warning from the chief of the UN comes just as new data shows that over the last 10 years, the planet warmed at its fastest rate ever recorded and is expected to blow past the 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature increase deemed a red line by the UN climate panel at some point within the next 5 years. And further accelerating this warming is Israel's war on Gaza, something else that the UN Secretary General has called for an end to. New research shows that Israel's genocide campaign isn't just a moral stain on the entire world, particularly its enablers in the West. It's a climate time bomb. A team of researchers found that in just the first 120 days of the conflict, more pollution was generated than the annual emissions of 26 individual countries and territories. And that carbon cost to rebuild Gaza will outweigh the emissions of over 135 countries. Added all together, this war is likely to generate the same emissions as nearly 16 coal-fired power plants churning endlessly for a year. What a disaster for humanity on every damn level. New numbers out today show the economy continues to add jobs. And while some economic technocrats continue to tout the strength of the Biden economy, there are signs that the Federal Reserve's years-long quest to punish workers for inflation is having its intended effect, and it's now likely to tip the economy into a recession. That's at least according to the Fed itself. This week, it updated its probability of a U.S. recession within 12 months to 52%. A number of gloomy economic reports have dropped recently. First, job openings are down to their lowest level since February 2021, meaning workers are competing more and more with each other for openings, which is reducing wages. It's part of the reason why in the first quarter of the year, labor costs rose at their slowest pace in 3 years. And new numbers this week out of the Bureau of Labor Statistics suggest that the labor market is much weaker than the Fed believes. The new payroll data shows that job growth last year was about 60,000 less per month than what was initially reported. It's typical for monthly economic figures to be revised up or down later when a fuller picture of the economy is gathered. The problem, according to Bloomberg, is, quote, if hiring has already been slower than widely perceived, that raises the risk that Powell and his colleagues will overdo it by keeping monetary policy too tight for too long. And that would trigger a recession. Meanwhile, the European Central Bank senses tremors in the economy and did move to cut rates this week alongside other central banks around the world. The Fed will make a decision next week on whether or not to follow suit, or if U.S. workers haven't felt enough pain yet. Folks, it's time to name them and shame them, tag them and bag them. It's this week's Rich Dicks. As always, thank you so much for the nominations on social media. We got our regulars here. Arona nominated All the Goddamn Landlords. Nora nominated Genocide Joe, as well as Genocide Pitchman, State Department spokesperson, and Weasel in a Suit, Matthew Miller. The Wolf nominated Miriam Adelson, one of the richest women in the world, the widow of casino tycoon Sheldon Adelson, and huge funder of Zionist groups. Gore Mantis nominated Jimmy Fallon and his security team for being pricks to Code Pink protesters who disrupted a taping of an interview with Vice President Kamala Harris. And Daytona Slim nominated Spanish judge Lino Rubio Mayo, who sentenced 6 people to jail recently for their involvement in union organizing. That's garbage. Strong nominations, as usual. Thank you to everyone. But ultimately, this week's Rich Dick is Ashton Kutcher. Yes, the actor known for his roles in film masterpieces such as What Happens in Vegas and Dude, Where's My Car, has a vision for the future of TV and movies, and it sucks. during a recent chat with Google CEO Eric Schmidt, the guy who is also helping to develop weaponized drones for the Pentagon right now, but that's for another day. During this chat, Kutcher talked about the power and potential of AI machines to create movies themselves. He was promoting OpenAI's generative video tool known as Sora and claimed that its outputs are nearly there to be used in major motion picture films. Quote, "Why would you go out and shoot an establishing shot of a house in a television show when you could just create the establishing shot for $100? To go out and shoot it would cost you thousands of dollars. Action scenes of me jumping off this building, you don't have to have a stunt person go do it. You could just do it with AI." Yeah, movies are great and all, but what if we reduce labor costs? Then they might be even better. Kutcher then went on to describe a future in which individuals are just making their own movies with AI. Quote, "You'll just come up with an idea for a movie, then it will write the script, then you'll input the script into the video generator, and it will generate the movie. Instead of watching some movie that somebody else came up with, I can just generate and then watch my own movie." Now, sure, you might get the occasional 17-fingered actor, and the dimensions of the film might not conform to physics, and yes, it will consist of stolen ideas from other films, and sure, most everyone working in Hollywood today will lose their jobs because of this, but other than that, it will be great. If you're wondering why someone who owes their entire success to the, let's say, old model of Hollywood is so invested in this new AI-driven hellscape in which workers can no longer make a living in the industry because all their old work is now just reproduced by machines with no compensation, well, it's because Kutcher is literally invested in it. After people tired of his shtick following the end of that '70s show, Kutcher took his money, teamed up with a bunch of billionaire investors, and started his own venture capital firm. Yes, that's why you haven't seen much of the guy lately. He's not acting, he's busy accumulating capital. And one of the areas Kutcher is most active in is, artificial intelligence. Bloomberg reported last year that his VC firm, Sound Ventures, raised $243 million to invest in AI companies. Kutcher said, quote, "When we saw GPT be launched, we realized that this was an absolute breakthrough." That's right, the dude has money in OpenAI, which is something that probably should have been disclosed during the conversation, because when he's talking about its potential to make movies, he's not speaking objectively. He's just doing advertising for a product he's invested in. Too bad AI wasn't around for Kutcher to use when he was writing letters in support of his That '70s Show co-star, rapist Danny Masterson. I guess Kutcher just had to write those from the heart, which he did when he called Masterson a, quote, role model. This is all sort of amazing because both Hollywood actors and writers went on a big long strike last year to address the risk of AI learning systems replacing human workers and the threat that is to livelihoods across the industry. And then Kutcher comes bigfooting in to be like, actually AI is good because people will be able to make their own shitty movies with a few mouse clicks. Enjoy the boat parties with David Zaslav or whatever, but you've punked yourself, dude. Ashton Kutcher. He's this week's Rich Dick. Putting out another call this morning for more Sunnies. We need more Sunnies. Shoot them and send them in. Email is below, submissions@means.media. The show ends today with a sunrise from North Carolina. It was sent in by Cora in Raleigh. Enjoy. Thank you, Cora. Show's over. Thank you for watching, and thanks to the team behind the scenes. Please sign up for Means TV, subscribe to our YouTube and podcast channels, and follow us on social media. One day capitalism will fall. Until then, we're going to be right here. See you next week.